All right, welcome back. 29 minutes, or rather 19 minutes away from 4 o'clock this Thursday afternoon. I'm Gareth Edwards. Dan Moyane is away for today's edition of the show. Well, the agricultural sector has welcomed government's declaration of a state in disaster in several provinces due to recent flooding. AgriSA is, however, urging Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma to put measures in place to ensure relief funding is deployed in both a transparent and accountable manner. So let's hear then from Andrea Campher. She's the Risk and Disaster Manager at AgriSA. Andrea, good afternoon. I appreciate your time. Why would there be a call for the Cooperative Minister to do this? Are you concerned it won't happen?
Two national state of disaster declarations in less than 1 week from another. And holistically speaking, it's a great concern because the impacts that's being reported from the flooding disaster and the energy crisis is severe. So when a national state of disaster is declared, there is funding being mobilized. And we would like to see that it is being distributed in a transparent and accountable manner, and to ensure credibility amongst other, and it's not undermined by bureaucratic red tape. I know that we are still currently being, impact assessments are still being currently underway. So while funding are being, reprioritized and budgets are being reprioritized, we would like to see that this funding goes to the farmers or the affected people in a accountable manner.
We're going to come back to how you would like to see this being distributed. The oversight, I think, is what we're trying to get down to, Andrea. Just give me a sense, if you don't mind, the kind of damage that your sector is dealing with as AgriSA. Give me some numbers. How bad is this?
Well, we're in the middle of the storm, quite literally, because the flooding is still going to carry on till the end of this week. So when the rain is cleared, impact assessments will then be undertaken to determine the extent of the damage. So provincial disaster management centres have already been undertaking preliminary assessments. And what's reported last year with the floods, that damages exceeded more than 8 billion rand for one province, and that was KZN. So our biggest concern at this stage is road infrastructure and bridges. The reparation of road infrastructure is also, like I said, the most important priority. But what also been reported is farmers have, lost their irrigation equipment, pumps and pump houses are submerged, local dams have been damaged, livestock and wildlife losses have been reported. But I think just keeping it in essence is the road and the bridge infrastructure, because at the end of the day, that's impacting the supply chain. It can impact the supply chain. And as we are currently speaking, we know that the department is currently undertaking site visits to these affected areas.
So when we now start talking timelines as well, when it comes to crops and animals that have been badly affected, let's just remind viewers as well, if you've just joined us, the state of disaster that's been declared as far as flooding is concerned, Andrea, and you'll know this, of course, it's 7 of the 9 provinces. Let me name them just so we understand the extent of what we're talking about. As I read these names, understand how important these provinces are for farming. Eastern Cape, Mpumalanga, Gauteng, KZN, Limpopo, the Free State and the Northwest. It's essentially the entire country, Andrea, and it's essentially the entire agriculture sector. So we need this, and we need this now. What's your timeline? What do you need?
Well, the state of disaster declaration is normally 3 months active. So within this next 3 months, impact assessment needs to be done. But I think what now important is resources are being deployed, such as South African Police Service and Defence Force, to rescue people that might be in these areas. But for the agricultural sector, it's difficult now to determine the exact amount of impact, because it's over a wide range of commodities, as you mentioned. You get your immediate impacts will be felt on your fruit and vegetable farmers, and how that will then obviously the supply chain and access to markets. But then also, if you look at your grains and in those areas, it's too early to determine the extent of the impact. But what we can say, where there was above normal rainfall in certain areas, we might see good yields. So it's a little bit of both. But I think the impact currently being felt by also sugarcane farmers and cotton farmers in Mpumalanga, KwaZulu-Natal, it's quite severe, and infrastructure is badly damaged at this stage.
Help me understand, is our food security as a nation at risk?
Not at all, not national food security. What we can say is regional economies are being impacted. So let's take in the Lowveld, the farmers in that area will be negatively impacted for the next coming year. With the impacts of the flooding, and then also with load shedding. It's two extensive risks that farmers are being faced with: cold chain supply, as well as through the supply. So yeah, I think the impacts are immediate, but there's also longer term impacts that will be felt in those areas. But no national food security at this stage are at risk. But food insecurity on household level is always a risk.
Could this make it a lot worse for families who can't afford food? Could we see an increase in price? I understand you're not an economist, of course, but this will have a knock-on effect on price, and many families already can't afford to simply buy the basics.
Yeah, definitely. Supply chain, when there is the demand exceeds the availability of produce, especially when we see fruit and vegetables needs to go to markets, and with road infrastructure damage or supply chain disruptions, we might see an increase in these type of produce at this stage. So there will be immediate impacts, but also longer term impacts if we cannot rectify or mitigate the current risks or the disaster that we are currently in.
As I say goodbye to you, Andrea, give me a sense as well then, are there jobs at risk? That might be more of a medium-term issue. Right now, workers on farms will be helping to get the system up and going. But if farmers aren't making money, we know what that leads to. Could we see job losses in agriculture?
Well, it definitely has a ripple effect, especially on these local communities, because when a farmer suffers, the local community, the town suffers at the end of the day, the local grocer, the pharmacy. So yes, it might have a ripple effect. It's too soon to say if it will have that big of an impact, but just speaking holistically, looking at this, it will have on job losses. There might be job losses, farmers that needs to, plant again, replant, resources not being available. If farmers didn't have any insurance, that will also be a big financial knock for them. So I think at this stage we are still not sure what is the extent of the impact. But there will be definitely an impact.
They say that rain in Africa is a blessing. However, in a case like this, it might actually be the complete opposite. Andrea, thank you very much. Indeed, giving us a sense of the lay of the land, if I can use that cliche. It's not good news, but are welcoming is the agricultural sector, the state of disaster to try and assist with the flooding. 7 out of 9 provinces. My thanks to Andrea Campher, giving us a very good idea of what it looks like on the ground for farmers, workers and food security in our country. Andrea Campher is the Risk and Disaster Manager at AgriSA.